So this video is going to be thoughts on the Mahabharata, specifically Devdutt Paknayak's version that is called Jaya. This is going to be kind of a multi-part series as far as I'm planning, but this is going to be part one of my thoughts on the Mahabharata. So the Mahabharata basically means the epic of man, and it's the longest epic poem ever written that we have record of. I have a lot of thoughts on Mahabharata. I've read it in a couple different forms, and I've listened to it in one form, Jaya, by Devdutt Paknayak. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. But there's a lot to go through. There's some people that consider it the final Veda. But there's some insights that are universal that I'm going to go into in this part, as well as future parts. I plan on doing a multi-part series on this because there's a whole lot of ground to cover, and a lot of the ground is ground that I seek to cover and like to cover because I love Mahabharata. I've listened to the Ramayana as well. I've read a piece of the Ramayana, and the Mahabharata, it applies to, the Ramayana can apply to many things. The Mahabharata can apply to basically everything human in my own understanding of it. But yes, this is going to be my thoughts on the Mahabharata, part one. So instead of going through kind of an outline of what the Mahabharata is, if you don't know what it is, you should research it. You should, get some overview of it. I'm just going to go into my thoughts on it rather than trying to lay out the whole groundwork for you, which is an endeavor that will take much longer if I were to take that route. So, the Mahabharata from ancient India. I will say that a really great lesson to just start off with is Dharma is not about justice. It is about empathy and growth. Because when we think about justice for who? And how far back do you want to trace the crimes that justice is trying to solve or meet or resolve? Time and human endeavor and action is a sequence of events that goes back as long as existence. And one thing causes another. There's no crime that exists in a complete vacuum. There's always a cause of everything. This is why empathy and growth is the purpose, not so much meting out punishments. That's what Dharma is about. Empathy and growth, not meting out those punishments. Because there's so many different factors in existence in regards to karma, in regards to cause and effect, which is what karma is, and in regards to history. And, a lot of people, it even says in Jaya, version of the Mahabharata that's available on audiobook, Aztec asks the prince that he's relating this history to, he tells, rather, the prince says, who's the villain? Who are the villains and who's the heroes in the Mahabharata? And Aztec says, that's for you to determine. We want heroes and villains and things. We want to say, okay, that's the good side, that's the bad side. And then side with the good side. That's a very limited understanding of both morality and the Mahabharata. The Pandavas, they seem to be the good guys. The Kauravas, they seem to be the bad guys. The Kauravas, led by Duryodhana. Yudhishthira was the eldest brother of the Pandavas. Well, not counting Karna, but that's a little bit different subject. Duryodhana was the eldest brother of the Pandavas, of the Kuru clan. he would not part with a pinpoint of land to give to the Pandavas out of respect for their rightful kingship. And he wanted everything. He wouldn't part with any of it. And, Krishna, who as Vishnu descended onto earth to kind of right the wrongs that humanity has accumulated in a way, but not really punishing all of humanity. More, the earth was being stressed and confined and abused by human kings. So God comes down in the form of Krishna to set everything right. Krishna asked for the Pandavas eventually just one pinpoint of land, and Duryodhana, who represents material desire, Paramahansa Yogananda called him King Material Desire, said, "I will not part with one pinpoint of land for the Pandavas. This kingdom is one. I will not mutilate it." Really, he was serving his own ego and material desire. He couldn't bear to think that the Pandavas could have anything, even though they had rights to half of the kingdom. Couldn't part with even a pinpoint of land. That small little, just one tiny, literally like just that much land, he wouldn't even part with. He definitely represents material desire. So the Pandavas, they seem like the good guys. Like they're Krishna is on their side, but only because Duryodhana claimed what God has, not what God is. Because God, in the form of Krishna, asked both of them, Arjuna and Duryodhana, what they wanted from him. Arjuna said, just you, Krishna, just your advice. I just want you to be my charioteer. I don't want your armies, I don't want your wealth. All I want is your advice. That's what Arjuna asked. And he asked that first, and Duryodhana was very happy. Arjuna got to ask first for a couple of reasons. But Duryodhana, he's like, I get your armies. He got what God has, his armies, not what God is, the advice, the person. And keep in mind that Krishna vowed to not fight on the battlefield. So Arjuna just wanted Krishna's advice, didn't even ask for Krishna as a warrior. Duryodhana wanted Krishna's armies. Once again, this may seem very odd to us nowadays. It's a different time, but also it was more boiled down to the question of, do you want what God has, which is material, that he can provide, or do you want what God is, the personhood of God? That's what it boils down to. But going back to the idea of who's the heroes and who are the villains, we like heroes and villains. We also like to hear redemption stories. Like, we like to hear redemption stories because we feel like we can become better, and we like to hear who the heroes or villains are because we like to pick a side and figure out who's right and who's wrong and side with the right side. It's human nature. It's tribalism. Sometimes with the best of intentions. But the whole Mahabharata tries to get you to tear down those constructs, those human constructs that we have of the idea that there's a redemption story and also heroes and villains. Ultimately, everyone wins in Dharma. Because Dharma is not about punishing anybody. The moral code of existence is not about punishing. It's about helping everybody grow into their best selves, burning off demerits, and experiencing the profits or pleasures of merits for your actions. But nobody's meant to be punished eternally or anything like that. It's more about everything that you experience as bad is meant to teach you, as well as everything that you experience that is good. It's all about it. It's a teaching process. It's not a criminal system. It's not a system of punishment. But Duryodhana, he seems like the villain because of his desire, his material desire. But the Pandavas, there's many times in the epic that they could have averted their calamity or this war. And by the way, this war, the Mahabharata, 18 days, over 1 billion people died on one battlefield. And there's a lot of descriptions in the Mahabharata in many different forms that it sounds like they're flying spaceships, like not in space, but like over the battlefield. There's a lot of talk of flying chariots, of firing missiles, and then somebody knows how to recall a missile. Another person doesn't know how to recall a missile, and the idea is arrow, but this is described in the way of more missiles. And one arrow slash missile, could kill like hundreds of people. It sounds like aircraft, like a fighter jets fighting over a battlefield is what it sounds like to modern day people. What it sounds like to me. I'll go eventually in one of these parts. I'll go into my theories. I think that it's accurate. Let's just put it that way for now. But the Pandavas, their eldest brother, they always thought Yudhishthira was their eldest brother, but it turns out Karna was. Now Karna, his mother Kunti, which was the mother of the Pandavas as well. When he was born, she used a mantra to call a god to give her a baby to see if it would work, called Surya. I also apologize for my mispronunciations, but she's like, oh, this actually happened. I actually have a child. I have a son. And then she was like 15 and she wasn't ready for it. So she put the child in a basket on a stream or a river. It seems to pop up a lot in different traditions. And eventually a charioteer and his wife found the child on a river or a stream, what have you. I think it's a river. And they raised him as a charioteer's son. Like that was his status in life, a charioteer. Once again, we're dealing with the ancient caste system, not the reimagined caste system that the British Empire kind of forced upon the Indians. Talking about the ancient caste system, with all its flaws and all its advantages, what have you. But when he competed against Arjuna when they were children, and Karna found himself on Duryodhana's side, he was actually just as good as an archer as Arjuna, and Arjuna was supposed to be the best archer in the world. That's what his teacher Drona made him to be. But the Pandavas, when they asked who his father was after he kind of like did an amazing feat of archery against Arjuna, just a competition. They asked who his father was, and he says he's called the son of a chariot driver, and they're like, this is not your place. What are you doing here? And Draupadi, who became the wife of the Pandavas, we'll go into that later. All 5 brothers of the Pandavas. She refused to. She was basically the prize, a wife, in this competition, this archery competition, and she refused to acknowledge the son of a chariot driver as a possible contestant. Duryodhana, who is King Material Desire, well, that's the words of Paramahansa Yogananda, he saw Karna's strength, his prowess, and he crowned Karna a prince of a particular part of India. Small part, but still made him a prince. The Pandavas chose to say Karna didn't deserve to be a competitor and he should stay in his place, while Duryodhana said, it's about merit. It's not about place in life. It's fate and destiny that chooses parents, but somebody who achieves something based on their own merits should be acknowledged as such. And Duryodhana was very apt and correct in the circumstance, according to me. His motivations might have been because he wanted to archer like Arjuna on his like family side. That could have been it. But regardless, he stood up for Karna when the Pandavas we usually think is the good side, look down on him because of his status in life. And the whole war could have been averted if Krishna even said this later on, that Draupadi would allow Karna to actually his merit to be acceptable in the competition, for he did better than Arjuna. If Draupadi would have married Karna, then the war would not have happened. That's one example of how the Pandavas, who we usually think is the good guys, weren't so good in an instance. And perhaps, that's one way that the war could have been averted. There's a whole lot of other things that happened later that could avert the war, and this by itself is not what caused the war. But that's one of the not crimes. Crimes is a stupid word in this instance. One of the ways that the Pandavas embraced ego over acknowledging the merits of a person. Once again, the Pandavas usually considered the good side. Kauravas usually considered the bad side. But it's complicated. The entanglement of sides and the idea of getting back at people, it's short-sighted. The further you look back in anything, the vaster reality becomes when you step back from a single small circumstance. It seems so like this is a good guy, this is a bad guy, or this is right, this is wrong. The further you step back, the more muddy the water becomes. And in a way, that's why a lot of people don't want to step back further and further and look at the grander picture. Because the smaller picture, the little black and whites, are easy to see. But when you stand back from the canvas, the little black and whites that are pixels makes everything much more gray. At any rate, I've gone over for long enough in this part. This has been part 1 of my thoughts on the Mahabharata. I hope this has been interesting. If you like this kind of video, shoot down comments in the comment section below on YouTube. Hit that thumbs up down there. It really helps out the channel. Please subscribe if you like anything like this. There's plenty of other videos that I have. At any rate, look forward to more parts. Thank you very much for watching, and all of you, have a wonderful day.